What's going on, guys? Brent031. Got my good buddy Bruce at Camp Armament. Be sure to check out his channel. We got a very first for you guys. This is a uniform, gear, weapons, and equipment video over the Korean War. This is something, the big project that we've been wanting to do for a very long time now. And as you guys are going to see, we spent a lot of time, money, and resources putting stuff together so that we can bring this to you guys. We're not going to get everything correct, guys. This is going to be a wave top overview of the uniform, gear, weapons, equipment carried by both the United States Army and United States Marines in the Korean War. And the Korean War, unfortunately, guys, is often glossed over. It's got the nickname the Forgotten War. Unfortunately, it just kind of, took place right after World War II. America did not mobilize in the sense that it did for World War II. It did not transition to that wartime economy. And people back in the States almost, lived normal lives like that wasn't even going on. So it's kind of the first modern war in the sense of, U.S. citizens being here in the States, not being directly invested in that conflict unless they actually had skin in the game. They were part of the military or family members in the military at that time. So, Bruce, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I agree completely. This is going to be a first for us. It's something that I know Brent's been wanting to do for a long time. It's one of those, again, forgotten wars. We've still got some of those veterans still with us today, and they never received the recognition that they deserve. The sacrifices that they made through the terrain, the enemy, and the climate that they had to fight through, from just blazing hot summers to frozen winters. It was real difficult time for those guys. Many of them didn't make it back. Many of them came back missing body parts and seriously injured, and they just didn't receive that recognition that our World War II vets had. When they came back from Korea, there were no giant victory parades or anything like that. They just kind of were faded into obscurity and were expected to go, right back to work, almost like it never happened. And so I think that's sort of a real sad part of history for our country, and that the least we can do is, having studied a little bit on this conflict and seeing the unbelievable sacrifices they made, is bring a video like this to sort of, for maybe some of you younger viewers that didn't know much about the Korean War. Well, hope you enjoy this video, learn a little bit more about it, and this inspires you to go and learn a little bit about the sacrifices that our troops made during that conflict.
Awesome. Let's dive into it. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to leave a comment. All right, guys, first thing we're going to talk about are the weapons. So the most commonly used weapons by both the Army and Marine Corps in the Korean War is primarily going to be carryovers from World War II. You just got to remember, like 1950, right? Only 5 years after the end of World War II with the Japanese surrender, and here we go, jumping right back into a major conflict. So the vast majority of the uniforms, gear, weapons, and equipment that's used during the Korean War is going to be carryovers from World War II. Absolutely true with the weapons, so let's dive right back in it. And first thing we're going to talk about are carbines, okay? So this is the M1 carbine. So we're going to talk about two different variants. This is the M1 carbine, and this is the M2 carbine. So the M1 carbine was the primary carbine that was used during World War II by both the Army and the Marine Corps. And there's some distinct differences between the M1 and M2 carbine. The M2 carbine is going to be the primary carbine that's used during the Korean War. But that's not to say that you're not going to still see some M1s floating around as well. But some characteristics, differences that we can see right off the bat is, you guys can see the differences between the sights, right? So here on the M2 carbine, you have an adjustable sight, and on the M1 carbine, you pretty much just have a fixed rear sight. You'll also notice that the M1 carbine does not have a bayonet lug, whereas the M2 carbine does have the capability of mounting a bayonet. So when M1 carbines were first issued, they just came with a fighting knife, just like this, right? A blade, much like a bayonet's blade, and that's what those guys were issued with. They had no capability of mounting that to their rifle. So on the M2 carbine, you guys can see bayonet lug, you absolutely have the ability to mount a bayonet. You guys can see it's essentially the same exact knife, except they added the capability of mounting the bayonet, all right? So that's an interesting thing. But the number one overall difference, in my opinion, between the M2 and the M1 carbine is the M2 carbine is fully automatic. And infantrymen, we love fully automatic weapons, right? All right, magazines for these weapons. So the standard magazine, while the M1 carbine was in service, was your 15 round box magazine. Obviously there's going to carry over into the M2s, but the new edition, and that's your 30 round magazines, you guys can see. The pouch for that is often referred to as the carbine jungle pouch, and this is your standard pouches that you will typically see on guys' gear that hold those 15 round magazines. Looking over here, you guys can kind of see the difference between the calibers. So this is your 7.62 by 25 millimeter Tokarev round. That's what the communist forces were using in weapons like their PPSH. And there's your 45. And then right next to it is your 30 caliber carbine ammunition. You guys can see it's essentially a pistol round. Okay, right next to that's a 7.62 by 54R, the kind of round that was shot out of the Mosin Nagant, commonly used by the North Korean and Chinese forces. And right next to that is going to be our 30-06.
Okay guys, let's look at the most common sidearm among U.S. forces during the Korean War, which was the 1911 A1. This handgun was produced during World War II. So these were all carryovers into the Korean War. They have, the A1 just had refinements and improvements made to it over the original 1911. We end up with typically plastic grips are pretty common to be seen on the 1911 A1. And 7-round magazine. Everything the same as it was in World War II. We would have holsters for those, and those could be carried in a couple of different ways. There was somewhat of a chest holster or shoulder holster that was very common. All the leather gear that you see during the Korean War with U.S. forces is typically brown or natural leather color. But you also had a belt holster, which is basically the same belt holster that was used from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, but the colors changed. So during Korea it was brown leather, and by the time we get into Vietnam we start to see the black leather becoming more popular. In terms of magazine pouches, you can see some of everything. So this is a World War I pouch. You can kind of tell that by the two snaps that it's got, one for each magazine. Just typical canvas pouch, and let's just note this snap here. Later on you have a pouch like this. This was what was current for the Korean conflict. Notice it's only got one snap for the two magazines, and again there's a snap on the back. What this did would slide over your belt, and then on your belt you would have this snap that corresponds with the snap on the pouch, and you would just snap that into place, and then that would hold that magazine pouch in place and keep it from sliding around on your belt.
All right, next weapons we're going to talk about are submachine guns. So probably the two most prolific submachine guns of the Korean War. Again, carryovers from World War II. But we got the M1A1 Thompson submachine gun. Obviously a classic, guys. This started to get replaced in World War II with the M3 grease gun, but you're definitely still going to see Thompsons in country in the Korean War. Magazine capacity, you have a 20-round magazine and a 30-round magazine. Fires, or excuse me, chambered in 45 ACP. Again, you guys can see the pistol caliber comparison there. Pouches would have been either a 5-cell or 3-cell style magazine pouches that would facilitate carrying your magazines. Next submachine gun, again, M3 grease gun. This was designed during World War II. It was meant to replace the Thompson. Obviously, you guys can see the Thompson is definitely a more cost consuming weapon to produce, right? A lot of fine machining, a lot more stuff goes involved with making that, as opposed to an M3 grease gun, which you guys can see, you know, the reason it was called a grease gun, for obvious reasons, it looks like a grease gun. But very basic, guys. Has a little trap door right there, and then the this variant just has a little lever to pull the bolt back. And your safety was essentially just this dust cover. So open up the dust cover and you're ready to rock and roll. Close it, you're safe, okay? Retractable wire stock, ain't nothing to it, guys. 30-round magazine, chambered in a 45 ACP. I even heard stories of M3 grease guns still in the arms of Abrams tanks crewmen during Desert Storm. So that is the submachine guns used in the Korean War in a nutshell.
We can't talk about the Korean War without talking about the M1 Garand. The M1 Garand was designed prior to World War II. We know it became the main rifle that all of our troops used during World War II, but even more so in Korea. Fired 30-06 cartridge. You see an example of that here. That's a plenty big round. Had very good range. and allowed a typical soldier or Marine to be able to engage enemy, whether up close or out far, and which you would have both situations present themselves during the Korean conflict. We have two examples of the M1 Garand here. One is closer built to what you would see during World War II, and it's got a lot of the early World War II features. It's got a milled trigger guard. It's got a lock bar type rear sight. It's got a leather sling, and this one actually has brass fittings on it. So this would be an early World War II style sling. Looking on the end of the rifle, the business end, you've got two different types of gas plugs. So one has a single slot in it, and the later ones had a dual slot, so they look more like a cross. So these would have been common earlier in World War II. By the time Korea came around, most had been replaced with the cross type. You've also got gas cylinders that are slightly different. And if you look at this one, you can tell it's completely round across the top, but here on the bottom, if you look, it's a humpback design. This has been beefed up so that when you're firing rifle grenades, it makes the end of the rifle stronger. So ammunition on the M1 Garand, as we said, was 30-06. Let's have a look at how that compares to what the communists had. This is your 30-06 round. This is your 7.62 by 54R round. Both are 30 cal, and both were very good for medium or longer ranges that were being encountered there during the Korean War. The M1 Garand loaded from an 8-round in-block clip. So you had 8 rounds together inside of a small stamped steel sheet metal clip. The way those would load is the rifle bolt would be locked to the rear. You would take this 8-round in-block clip, insert it completely into the rifle, and then pull the bolt slightly to the rear, release it. It would chamber that first round, and these would continue to fire in semi-automatic mode until the last round was ejected. And with that last round being ejected, the end block clip was also ejected out of the rifle. The bolt was locked to the rear, and it was ready to accept another 8 rounds. There were many improvements that were done on these M1 Garands. Let's look at this Korean type or late World War II type. You got a stamped trigger guard. We mentioned the machined milled trigger guard of the early World War II model. We've got a stamped trigger guard here. Look at the rear sight. This has been simplified. It's a little more reliable, a little more easier to maintain than the lock bar style on the World War II rifle. There are many other changes, but we're just kind of going over the highlights of those. We mentioned the brass fittings on the early World War II sling. By late World War II, we're starting to see steel fittings like this. And even by the end of World War II, these leather slings started to be phased out with cotton slings, like you would be familiar with on a M14 or an M16 during Vietnam. Well, these came about during late World War II for the M1 Garand. The reason for pointing all this out is that you see all of these features even in Korea because everything hadn't been completely transitioned over yet. By the end of World War II, everything in terms of military technology, especially with M1 Garands, kind of came to a halt. And those all of a sudden became reissued to U.S. troops going out to the Korean War. And you see a mixture of everything. Let's look at bayonets. So we've got a couple of different types of bayonets. So this is an early bayonet, and it's early because it's made from a very early pre-World War II bayonet that was very long. And they realized during testing those bayonets were too long and they could be shortened up quite a bit. So the idea was, let's just cut down long World War I bayonets and they'll work fine for World War II. The problem with that is this blood groove, or fuller as you technocrats like to call it. Military has used the term blood groove in the past. We can provide documentation for that if you want to have an internet argument. But that came out on the end and made the tip very weak. So they cut these off at an angle so that they had more steel here on the top to prevent it from breaking off when it was being stabbed into, whether it was training or whether it was in combat. Pretty soon they realized this was just a stopgap. Let's just make a new design bayonet blade so we can get away from having this issue with the fuller. And they went to a bayonet like this. You can see that one. If you look at the fuller, It's much shorter, and we have a lot of steel here up front to keep that from being brittle and breaking off. And it's just a nice spear-shaped point on there. You see both of these in World War II, you see both of these in Korea.
All right, guys, last rifle I wanted to talk about is the M1903 Springfield, also chambered in 30-06. This is the A3 variant, and you will see these from time to time in Korea. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is. I don't know if they're rear echelon troops, but as you guys can see in the pictures I'm showing, every once in a while you're gonna see somebody with an M1903. And a lot of UN forces would also end up with M1903s. So again, this in particular is the A3 model. A lot of M1903 variant rifles were used as sniper rifles. Don't have any of those type of examples out here for you, but you guys are seeing the pictures I'm putting up. So just wanted to mention it. One of the big difference, obviously it's a bolt action rifle, not a semi-automatic rifle like the M1 Garand, and it's fed with a 5-round stripper clip as opposed to your M1 Garand's 8-round in-block clip. All right, guys, let's talk about machine guns. So first on the block, what are Marine and Army automatic riflemen outfitted with? And that's going to be your M1918 BAR, Browning automatic rifle. And you guys can see this one is kind of in its stock configuration. It's got a bipod on there, a carrying handle. This had a detachable 20-round magazine, and it was fully automatic. So your automatic rifleman in your rifle squad would be outfitted with this. What is that automatic rifle good for? Hey, that's your crew serve killer, right? That's what your individual automatic riflemen are using to suppress enemy crew serves and enemy troops and positions while your riflemen are closing with at the squad level. Very good automatic rifle, served successfully in World War II, obviously carried over into Korea, and guys were hooking and jabbing a lot with it, okay? Bipod on the front was removable. Guys would often remove those just to lighten them up, just to make, you know, because as you guys can see, it's a heavy steel bipod, so it could be removed. How would guys carry their ammunition? So BAR belts. This is obviously different than what you're typically used to seeing with a guy with armed to something like an M1 Garand or an M1 carbine. You guys can see it had 6 individual pockets attached, kind of like bandoliers attached by a back belt, and each one of those pockets could hold 2 BAR magazines. And as the war progressed in World War II, you know, you obviously started off with your more khaki OD variant, and then as the war progressed in later years, as you guys can see, they get more green. Okay, so going into Korea, you're predominantly going to have guys outfitted with, you know, a whole mixture of gear, weapons, and equipment, but you're going to see the whole gamut, right? Could be khaki, could be a more darker shade OD color. Moving on, we have the M1919 machine gun. Again, chambered in 30-06, belt-fed machine gun. This would replace the M1917 that we're going to talk about here in a second. But very standard infantry machine gun, guys. This is, you know, went through almost the entirety of World War II. Very prolific machine gun and used extensively in the Korean War. You guys can see it has a tripod, a traversing and elevation mechanism here in the back, which is operated with your elevation hand wheel into a traversing hand wheel. And then it has the traversing bar that the machine gun can slide on. To remove the machine gun, you simply unlatch it and it'll pull out. So an infantry, marine, or soldier could just throw this over his shoulder and it can move with it like that, okay? Employ it, the machine gun team. One guy would have a tripod. You come, gunner sets the machine gun into the tripod. You close the latch, put the machine gun on the traversing bar, close your latch, okay, and then your weapon is fixed in place. Ammunition would come in an ammo can like this, and that's about the extent of that. Let's move on to this bad boy. So the M1917 water-cooled machine gun, okay? Very heavy machine gun, but guys, this is tried and true. This was designed towards the end of World War I, went through the entirety of World War II, into Korea, and probably was even around in Vietnam in the form of aid to the South Vietnamese. Okay, 30-06 machine gun, Water cooled. You guys can see the water condensing can here. You have a hose runs up, hooks into the water jacket here. Why did these have such a long service life? Guys, water cooled machine gun is obviously going to stay in the fight a lot longer than an air cooled machine gun like the M1919 over here. So very prolific machine gun, long service life, absolutely killed a lot of communists.
Okay, so grenades. So your most common grenade that you would see during the Korean War used by U.S. forces is the Mark II. This is commonly known as the pineapple grenade. There were multiple different variations of this as it was being developed through World War II, and they were changing different types of explosive powders on the inside of this. By Korea, these had been pretty much those standardized, and we had plenty of them ready for use. You also see, though, towards the very end of the war, variants of this M26. This is a super common grenade, sometimes called the lemon grenade, but super common in later variations during the Vietnam War. That's where it's probably most commonly seen, but just know that these were developed towards the very end of the Korean War, and some of them were seen there as well.
So here's a few replicas of some specialty grenades I wanted to mention. This right here is the Mark I illumination grenade. It would burn for 25 seconds, producing 55,000 candle power. Obviously, you can see the need for something like that in the middle of the night when you have human wave attacks of Chinese approaching your position. So obviously a very beneficial grenade to put in the hands of an infantryman to illuminate the enemy's position while still keeping yours masked. This one right here, M15 smoke grenade, so producing a heavy, white cloud of smoke to obscure enemy observation of your position. Always a good thing. There's also a colored smoke for signaling purposes. And the final specialty grenade I want to mention is the M14 incendiary grenade. And what would you use this for? Let's say you overran an enemy position that had crew-served weapons, i.e. mortars or artillery pieces. You could put this inside the bore or the breech of the weapon system, detonate that this grenade, and it would burn through and completely disable those pieces of equipment. You could put it on the engine block of vehicles, and it would burn through and completely disable that equipment. So enemy equipment that you captured, you can't take it with you. You don't want it falling back in the hands of the enemy and them being able to use it. So these type of grenades were very valuable. Yeah, and you could also use it on your own equipment. God forbid that the Chinese or North Koreans were overrunning your position. Disable your equipment if you can't bring them with you. So very valuable piece of equipment right there, and definitely was used in the Korean War. So spend a few minutes talking about rifle grenades. So the individual infantryman absolutely had the capability of firing grenades from his individual rifle. He accomplished that by adding these grenade launchers to the end of his respective service rifle. In this case with the M1 Garand, you had the M7 and later variants M7A1 and M7A3. And on the M1 carbine, you had the M8 variant that would attach to the end of the muzzle, enabling you to fire these respective grenades. There was also other accessories like the M15 sight that could be added to the weapons like the M1 Garand that would help assist with aiming that rifle grenade, but it wasn't necessary to have that on the rifle in order to fire it. But that sight would be kept in a little pouch like this that you can sometimes see on individual infantrymen's gear. All right, let's take a look at some of the more common rifle grenades used during the Korean War. So first and foremost, the Mark II grenade projection adapter. And as you guys can see, it just simply takes a standard Mark II hand grenade, fit it into an adapter, and all these rifle grenades would be fired by being placed on top of their respective rifle grenade launchers, and then they'd be fired with a specialized blank ammunition cartridge, which would project the grenade towards its intended target. So the next rifle grenade we're going to talk about is the M9A1 anti-tank rifle grenade. So the same problems that the 2.36-inch bazooka was having towards the end of World War II, this rifle grenade was having as well. It just wasn't as effective on the later built tanks of the World War II. So in this case, the Soviet-built T-34s that were used by the North Koreans and Chinese, these rifle grenades were not effective against that, which led to the development and implementation of this Belgian-made rifle grenade, the M28, which is what it was designated by the U.S. military. So a bigger warhead, just like the 3.5-inch bazooka round is a bigger round, and it fired from a bigger bazooka. Now we have a larger, more capable rifle grenade. Some other rifle grenades, you had smoke rounds, you had illumination rounds, but here's an example of a smoke round. But again, all these rifle grenades gave the individual infantryman a better capability and more enhanced in capability against both enemy armor as well as enemy fixed positions. All right, let's talk about bazookas. So what could our guys use to take out Soviet T-34 tanks rolling across that DMZ into South Korea, okay? So starting out, 2.36 inch bazooka. This is kind of the standard bazooka that most troops had during World War II. There was different iterations of the bazooka, but this is, you know, probably one of the one that was most commonly used in Korea in the early days. All right. This bazooka can actually be broken down. It's easily transportable, but you guys can see it has a stock that can go in your shoulder. All right, and then your trigger, fold out sight. So you look in the sight, fold up the sight window, and you could adjust it for range. This is a replica of a 2.36 inch bazooka. Okay, so now the problem with the 2.36 inch bazooka is, although it was good in the early days of World War II, you know, the Germans coming out with you know, heavier Panzers like the Tiger and Panther tanks, okay, these bazookas became less and less effective, prompting the development of the M20 that we're going to talk about here in a second, okay? But let's go back and still talk about the 2.36 real quick. This is a transport bag, so you guys can see it's got a handhold as well as a strap, so you can just throw it over your body here. All right. Let's open this sucker up and take a look at what a 2.36 inch rocket looks like. So you guys can see it's got these like packing tubes. These are individual rockets. So individual infantrymen could be tasked to carry these rockets. So this is a 2.36 inch rocket for that style bazooka. Now let's lead to the M20. Now what I have here is a later variant M20 Super Bazooka that was developed later on in the Vietnam War, okay? But the M20 that was used in Korea looked very similar to this. As you guys can see in the pictures I'm showing, it looked very similar to this. This is the M20A1B1 Super Bazooka, again, used in Vietnam, but very same style. It was a 3.5 inch rocket, much bigger, and just would eat up Soviet-built T-34 tanks, okay? But you guys can see, it's got a shoulder stop. You got your trigger guard and trigger housing here. Sight, again, foldable. Lift up that window, and you can look through it, and then you can adjust the range on the side. This is a real M20A1B1 Super Bazooka, okay? And similar to the previous model I showed you, this could also break down so that it was more easily man-portable. Now let's take a look at a 3.5 inch rocket, so you guys can see the difference between the 3.5 inch. Look at that. Look at the size comparison. So yeah. So unfortunately, when our guys were first thrown into the mix in Korea, they had these 2.36 inch bazookas, and their rockets just weren't as effective as the later 3.5 inch bazooka rockets shot out of the M20 Super Bazookas. So again, killed a lot of communists. All right, guys, next thing we're talking about is web gear for the individual infantrymen for both the Army and the Marine Corps. So there's some similarities in gear, right? Obviously with weapons and stuff, that's kind of universal, same things across the board for the Army and the Marine Corps. But when we talk about web gear, that's where we start kind of seeing some variances. So we'll just kick it off here and start talking about it. So first thing I would talk about are like BAR belts. Now, let me preface this, guys, and say that, again, this is carryover World War II gear, right? So you're going to see the vast array of stuff from, you know, your iconic khaki color, which is still olive drab. It's just a, you know, a lighter olive drab, going on to your mid olive drab to like a darker shade, okay? The vast majority of your stuff is still going to be, for the most part, probably, you know, the more khaki-oriented colors, but you're going to see everything, okay? Everything. Korea, after World War II, plenty of surplus stuff, so a lot of carryover. So let's talk about Marines first. Now, the M1 Garand belt is essentially the same. Now, the thing about it is the Marine belt is, on the Army belts, they're gonna be marked with US. On a Marine belt, you're gonna see on the inside, it's gonna say USMC, okay? But there's not gonna be the big US stamp markings on the outside, generally speaking. with Bruce and I doing Vietnam stuff, and in my own experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, guys are going to get stuff from across the board. Okay, so it might be like general guidance that, hey, a Marine's web gear is not going to say U.S. on it. It's going to be USMC marked only. However, hey, if his shit gets damaged in country, where's he going to get it? Probably Army supply, right? There's going to be a lot more of it. So it's a general rule to go by, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's like a golden rule. But generally speaking, USMC Garand belts are not going to be marked U.S. Some things that are specific to Marines, our canteen covers are going to be different in the Army. Generally, we do use a variant of the same Army style cover. You guys can see this one right here. You will see Marines with that, but you're going to see a lot of carryover World War II equipment, particularly the crossed flat dog ear style canteen covers. But any Marine variant canteen cover from World War II would have been used for sure if that particular Marine had it. Our suspenders, vastly different in the Army. We had the M1941 suspenders. You guys can see them right here. And, you know, were these superior? I don't know about that, but these would have a long service life. They'd be used from World War II all the way into Vietnam. So that was the Marine Corps, and they're essentially quick detach. You can attach them and take them off fairly easy. All right, I just pulled that one off.
Yeah, that's just a metal J-hook.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier, this applies to Army too, but when you're looking at actual photos of actual troops in combat, a lot of them just went without suspenders anyway.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of pictures you're seeing, just like Bruce said, no suspenders whatsoever. So you guys can see how this is set up on me, and you see these M1941 suspenders crossed in the back, and that's generally how, you know, a Marine's gear would be set up. Bayonet, we had the jungle first aid pouch. You'd have 2 canteens of water and your combat load of M1 Garand 30-06 rounds on a 8-round M-block clip. So Bruce, talk to us some about the Army.
So the common loadout for the Army wasn't really much different. Yes, some details in manufacture of the gear, but the basic loadout was the same. You would have a Garand belt, and again, like Brent said, these could vary in color because they were all holdovers from World War II or immediately right after World War II. And then those would hold a total of 10 8-round Garand clips, which would be a total of 80 rounds if my math is correct. Suspenders, there were different types of suspenders that were available. There's holdover World War II stuff. We've got a set here from 1936, which are pre-World War II and were used throughout World War II. 1943s that ended up replacing those, and then a 1945 set, which would probably been very common among U.S. troops that were or U.S. Army troops that were gonna use suspenders. Why would you want to use suspenders? Well, if you're carrying a pack like the M1945 pack, you're going to need suspenders. These little straps here won't fit around your shoulders. They might fit a kid, but they won't fit a grown man. So those would actually thread through these buckles on the M1945 suspenders so that you would have a full kit with a small pack on the back for your day-to-day fighting loadout. You would also have bayonet on there, a canteen on there, so this one's sort of set up very similar, and of course a first aid pouch would be common as well. And you want to let's talk about some of the first aid pouches, Brent.
Okay, this is a carryover from World War I, but you see these in World War II, and then you absolutely see them in Korea as well. Just a little pouch, wire hangers, and then inside there would be just a tin for a bandage. Okay, so this is one example. This is generally what you see with Marines, along with this one, which is more prominent with Army.
Yeah, most of the Army pictures I see guys running this. This is also a World War II era pouch, and it would hold that same Carlisle bandage in the protective tin as well.
And one thing to mention, like on the Jungle First Aid Kit, you have 2 eyelets on the bottom, so sometimes you'll see these hanging in combination with the Jungle First Aid Kit. I didn't talk about canteens yet.
Well, we got to hydrate, right? So these canteens are holdovers. Here's just a surprise from World War II. Metal canteen. These are stainless steel, I believe. They had a hard plastic or Bakelite type lid. And there's definitely some benefits to having a metal canteen over a plastic canteen. In Korea, you could heat these, whereas the plastic canteen's a little more difficult. And of course, your canteen cup. This one we were actually talking, this is dated 1945, but these didn't change much from World War II, really through Vietnam.
Yep.
And just a stainless steel cup. Canteen sits inside, and of course, these can be heated to make your morning coffee.
Yeah, Marines were absolutely still using these metal canteens going into the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So, what else we got here?
Talking about entrenching tools.
Yeah, once you hit that.
So on e-tools, we have two different types of e-tools. These both were an iteration from a World War II e-tool. So this is your 1943.
Yeah, that's
correct?
43.
That's a 43, and it's just a simple entrenching tool, wooden handle. The tool will fold out, and so you can use it as a hoe or fold it all the way out and use it as a shovel. Those will lock in a two-position lock. The 1943 did not have a pick on the back, but later on a pick was added to those so that you would also have the ability to another ability to entrench yourself into the ground, particularly if it's rocky, frozen, whatever. That pick could probably come in pretty handy.
Oh yeah. So if you guys have ever done any time trying to dig a fighting position, I'm telling you, pickaxes are absolutely essential. And so this is something else that might be part of an infantry squad during Korean War, is just a Maddox. So just a simple pouch, wire hanger, and then you have the wood handle, and then the actual cast iron head that would help really dig in that dirt. Might even have a hatchet to help break up or chop apart wood, or help whatever the hell you need a freaking hatchet for, whether that's cutting firewood or whatever the case may be. Remember, it's Korea, it's super cold.
And
so
for me, just thinking about someone taking a nice hatchet head blade and using it for anything other than cutting wood kind of breaks my heart. But no doubt, when you're out there trying to survive and digging a hole in the ground to get you away from artillery and rifle fire, I'm sure that those were used to break ice and probably rock as well.
And probably a couple communist skulls. So another means of carrying ammunition, guys, just the bandolier. The bandolier that these, when ammunition was delivered in ammo boxes, and they opened those up and they had bandoliers in there with the in-block clips inside. Guys can just throw these under their body and get moving real quick.
You see this a lot too in photos. They'll have a couple crossed over their body. Super easy to deploy.
One thing I got laying out here, very common for Marines, K-bar fighting knife. All right, so just an iconic Marine piece of gear. Something else we have, angle head flashlight, earlier versions. We got the pistol belt, which Bruce already hit on earlier with the, yeah, he's a sport in there, look at you.
Got mine on.
So as you guys can see, this is kind of an earlier, World War II era khaki colored style belt. And then the one Bruce has on is a little bit darker shade OD.
Now I think a lot of guys, particularly reenactors, can go a little overboard on shades of khaki versus OD. But I think that the basic idea was that during World War II, this khaki color would fade until almost a white. And then it really stood out. And they realized, well, let's start making them a darker color. Then as they fade into more of the khaki color and they still blend in. That seems to be kind of the reasoning behind going from one shade to another. And you see sometimes what's known as transitional. You can see it a little bit in this belt, is that it's, and I'm not sure if it comes across on the camera, but it's one shade of green down here and another up top, as they were switching between materials to produce these. They didn't just all of a sudden say we're going to stop making the light color and start making the dark color and cease all operations and all issuance together. Quite the contrary. Come Korea, you see a mix of everything.
I've got a good example of that here, which I'll get in a second when I start talking about packs. Just to finish up, a couple other things you might see on a web gear, like a compass pouch right here, little pouch with a wire hanger. Particularly with Marines, you have these like wire cutting tools. So a pouch like this, hanging off, Marines also had I think this is a Marine specific item, not on Army. I don't think I've ever seen a picture of any Army guys rocking one of these, but two cell pouch for hand grenades. So wire hanger, leg tie. So you'll see this attached to a Marine's gear, and he can tie it off around his leg if he so chooses. So you already hit on your pack, so I'm going to hit on ours. The M1941 style pack. So very, very prevalent in World War II. Obviously a carryover, but you know, same concept as the Army pack, but we could actually wear these standalone. So these straps right here could actually be attached to the pack itself, and then an individual Marine could wear it either by itself as the pack, or he could tie it in with his M1941 suspenders. Two different variants you'll probably see in Korea. This is one, and this fold-over style like this. They're both M1941 packs, but they're just different iterations of the same pack. There's also a lower pouch you may or may not see. Generally, if guys are moving farther distances, they'll have the lower section attached. So you'll have the top portion of the pack, the lower portion of the pack, and then you'll have like a bedroll, you know, going over the backside, and it's all combined into one single system. So that was the M1941 pack system. Here's a good example of what Bruce was talking about, the transitional phase. You have a little bit darker, you know, shade of OD, but as you guys can see, they're still using the same types of straps that are the same color shade as this on this, right? They're just not going to throw that stuff off to the wild. They're going to use it up. We're talking the military, close enough for government work, right? So this is a good example of a transitional pack, transitioning from, you know, the lighter shades of OD to the darker shades of OD. So I think that's pretty much it. I do have some binos here, so you might see some pictures of you know, officers or maybe even staff NCOs. So yeah, I haven't talked about that yet. You know, carrying a case like that, and then inside this case will be some binoculars. So this is just like a general ammunition pouch. You might store some grenades, some rifle grenades in here, but you may see this strapped over the shoulders.
Some submachine gun mags, maybe?
Yeah, that as well. One more item. This is just a mortar round carrying vest. So this is something that you would throw, a guy could throw over himself, and he could carry mortar rounds. Probably even throw some freaking rockets in there as well.
Sure.
One thing I didn't talk about earlier. The old pack board. So pack board, real simple. Guy puts this on, he can strap ammo cans, rocket rounds, all kinds of stuff to the pack board. So
these are great for something that would not be comfortable in a regular soft pack. Maybe it's a hard cornered ammo can or something, or like you said, like rockets that are a strange shape. Pack it on there and go, right?
Yeah, so essentially if you have a large heavy load, this is the way to go. Think of like an Alice pack frame. This is essentially what these were for. All right, next we're going to talk about boots. So we'll talk about Army boots first. Bruce?
Okay, well, jump right into it. These are your low boots. These are known as rough out boots. This is a World War II era boot. These were designed to be worn with the leggings like we have here. You see these all the time through World War II, but also we'll talk about how the Marines have a version of this that they use in Korea when we get around to Brent. But for the Army, your most common boot is the M1943, what's known as a double buckle boot. You can see it's got two buckles on top. This is essentially the same boot as the rough out boot. They just put a collar on the top so they can get rid of these leggings. So these are designed to be worn without the leggings, just exactly as they are. You also will see the M1948 though. And the M1948 looks just like a World War II jump boot, but there's a couple of real minor differences. And I think these are referred to as the M1948 russet leather boot. But the soles are complete rubber instead of being a half sole like the World War II jump boots were. And there's also no ankle reinforcement like the World War II jump boots had. But otherwise, they look almost the same. What do you got on the Marine side, Brent?
Similar to the Army's boot in World War II, this is their rough out service boot. The Marine Corps had boondockers. Now I don't have the boondockers up here on the table because I'm freaking got them on my feet, but you guys can see the pictures of them. Very similar. We did wear the leggings. Marine leggings are a little bit different than the old Army leggings. We had a lot less eyelets than the Army variant. So, but like Bruce said, Marines were still wearing leggings going into Korea. What did they have on their feet? Hey, standard regular issued, military issued socks. And in the cold weather conditions, which we'll hit those here in a second, you had the thicker wool socks. What would ultimately replace these? Well, let me also mention that double buckle boots provided by the Army. You will see some Marines wearing those. So how did they get those? Hey, just supply issues, right? I remember my own story in Iraq, 2004. Halfway through my deployment, my boots fucking took a shit on me and I had to get replacements. I ended up wearing Army boots that I bought from an Army PX. There were no Marine Corps boots available, so that's what I wore. I could see those same types of circumstances happening in Korea. So that's probably why you're seeing some Marines wearing the double buckle boots. Could be wrong, just my guess. What replaced the boondockers ultimately was the M1951 boot. This is a Marine specific boot, so you're not gonna see Army guys wearing these boots. Very similar in appearance though, it's that russet combat boot, but we have the speed laces where you can wrap the lace around those little hooks.
I see more of a pointed toe too, like the boondockers.
Yes, correct. And but very similar in appearance, and these particular boots would go all the way into early days of Vietnam. All right, let's talk about some of the cold weather boots. So think that that winter of 1950, the Chosin Reservoir, what Marines have on their feet, and that's the old shoe pack. So shoe packs were developed during World War II. For what they were pretty good. So you had like a rubber lower and a leather upper, and they were specifically designed for cold weather operations. The problems with shoe packs, and ultimately the problems with any cold weather specific boot is, hey, you move, you sweat, and in those particular conditions, in those temperatures, sweat equals death, or sweat equals freaking
frostbite.
Frostbite, thank you.
And this is a particularly interesting pair because you just took it right out of the wrapper.
Yes.
This is a new old stock, never worn, never issued pair with the tags on.
Correct. Tag is still on there, guys. So an unbelievably brand new condition. Shoe packs here, and these would be issued with I believe 2 pairs of wool socks. So an individual Marine or soldier would have 2 pairs of wool socks, and he'd also get a replacement felt liners for the bottoms that they would replace. And the key thing is when guys would move, they just needed to change their socks to take those wet socks off, put clean dry socks on to prevent that frostbite. Shoe packs would ultimately be replaced with these rubber boots that look very similar to what we still use in the U.S. military, the Mickey Mouse boots. So these are all rubber cold weather combat boots, and these would be introduced in Korea. So if you've ever worn Mickey Mouse boots, this is where they came from, guys. The hard lessons learned during the Korean War, but these would replace the shoe packs as the primary cold weather boot for both the Army and the Marine Corps.
So 2 other boots I want to mention before I wrap up the cold weather boots, and this is the rubber over boot, and you guys can see very distinctive with the 5 buckles here, and this would just go over your regular combat boot. And tag here, it says February 14th, 1951, and you'll sometimes see these in Korea. Another one is a mukluk, so this is just a cloth boot specifically designed for cold weather environments, better for dry cold, because obviously this cloth isn't going to do much in a wet cold environment. And then they would have inside a very thick bootie that your foot would go into. These are dated 23 March 1951. So just a couple more boots that you might see in the Korean War.
Okay guys, so let's talk about Army uniforms at the time. We're going to start off with what would be moderate to mild climate uniforms, then we'll get into cold weather next. This is your typical HBT uniform. This was developed during World War II. By the time Korea came around, The main difference that happened during World War II is these went from sort of a light shade, remember we talked about that khaki color, to a darker color. By the time that Korea came along, in terms of clothing, probably most of them would have been this darker shade. I'm also wearing that same uniform here. And it's just a very lightweight. HBT is the material, herringbone twill. Two large pockets, two large breast pockets. These were designed to be tucked in, although during operations combat, a lot of times you see these being untucked just for comfort. And the trousers are made much the same way. They've got two large thigh pockets, or maybe you call that a buff thigh pocket. Metal snaps throughout the construction. And they're just a single layer of HBT material, which is cotton and relatively comfortable in hot weather. Pretty good uniform. In terms of what would be worn under that, this is just an example of what we would call today a tank top made out of cotton. And you may also see these as a t-shirt in green, or as a white cotton t-shirt. I've seen those also, or white cotton tank tops. And then your skivvies here, just simple thin cotton, should they have chose to wear those. This is just typical of construction from the time. In terms of hats, so what I've got here, let's come over to the Ridgeway cap, because I've been sporting this the whole video, because you know, who could model this better than me? Seriously, don't I look good in this? I'm gonna buy one of these to wear every day. This is called a Ridgeway cap. We look in this book, this wasn't a military issue cap, this was private purchase. Here's an ad where you could purchase those. But guys would go in, purchase these on their own, and they were real common, particularly among troops that weren't combat troops, but were behind the lines or a higher level in rank. In terms of hats that you would see in the field, so let's look, we got two examples here. So this is a World War II example. This is a 1944, M1904 we think, cap, and it's got ear flaps that'll fold down. They have very thin wool lining on them here, and they're called, let's see what they're called here. Yeah, well, this one's dated 1944, so it may not be known as an M1944, but it's dated 1944. And it was just a typical Ranger, what we'd call today a Ranger style cap with wool padded ear flaps. Now, later on, get into Korea, you start to see the M1951. Very similar cap, ear flaps that fold down. We've got some thin wool lining there. Very, very, very similar hat. And these would have been commonly seen, worn during the Korean conflict.
All right, guys, let's look at the uniform worn by Marines and just regular temperature. So, you know, your regular everyday utility uniform, like Bruce said, we'll talk about winter clothing here in a minute. This is the pattern 41 utilities. These were very common in Korea. These are what was predominantly worn during World War II and would move forward into Korea. Trousers, same HBT material that's on the Army uniform, but you guys can see on the trousers. And oh, and by the way, these are all reproduction uniforms. Nothing is original here. But front pockets, you guys can see belt loops. It's closed with buttons, and the buttons on them actually say Marine Corps, so that's pretty neat. On the back, you got two rear pockets, but no cargo pockets. Keep that in mind, because I'm going to show you this next pattern here. All right, next pattern I'm going to show you is called pattern 44. So this was developed towards the end of World War II and would move forward into Korea as well. So one thing you can see on the blouse here is you got a left breast pocket, all right, a buttoned up left breast pocket. It also has some larger chest pockets that you can put stuff in. I don't know what they would keep in there, but it has that capability, okay? But very similar to pattern 41, just those extra pocket features. Okay, so that was the jacket or blouse. Here's where you really start to see the differences between the pattern 44 and the pattern 41. You'll notice you have these large cargo pockets on the front sides, all right? So kind of starting in the front, moving it away partially to the side, big large cargo pockets. You do not have the front pocket for your hands. You still got a button fly. You also have, these are kind of neat, little hook loops here that you could actually use your pattern 41 suspenders or M41 suspenders to hold up these pants. So that was something that could be done. All right, looking at the back here, this is very unique to the Marine Corps, but you have this large ass pocket. Now you might be wondering, like, what the hell you put in there? So the idea was that Marines could fold up their poncho and put their poncho in here. So that was the idea behind these trousers. But you can you commonly see Marines wearing these style of utilities in Korea. Okay, and it's just a dead giveaway because they got this large ass pocket right here on the utility trousers. Now, the camouflage utilities, the pattern or P42 utilities that were used during World War II, you don't see much use of them in Korea, but they were used in very limited capacity. Probably for, you know, reconnaissance troops. I don't know. I've seen a few pictures of guys wearing them, but they weren't as widely used as they were in World War II. Undergarments, skivvy shirt, it's either going to be white or you guys can see this olive drab style utility shirt, and then your skivvies are going to be the same as the Army, just your standard World War II era skivvy drawers. All right, so Marine Corps utility cover, kind of the predecessor of our modern day 8-point cover, but this was the primary headwear of Marines in that era. That wraps up the Marine Corps uniforms. Let's move on to the winter. All right, guys, now we're going to talk about cold weather stuff. So when you think about the Korean War, you're thinking cold weather, right? So just got some stuff laid out here. Some of it is specific to the Marine Corps, some of it is specific to the Army, but there's a lot of cross-pollination, so we'll do our best, okay? Don't have every little minute thing, guys, but you're gonna hit the wave tops, hopefully here, okay? So the approach to cold weather in the Korean War was a layering system. So literally just putting on a whole bunch of freaking layers, and that's how you kept warm, okay? So the first layer that you're gonna look at is your essentially your base layer, and that's gonna be like your underwear, okay? So your thermal underwear. So here's an example of a top and bottom, and these were the same type of long underwear that was worn in World War II, okay? So typically, from my understanding, the Army would have had these olive drab style long underwear, and then the Marine Corps, for the most part, would have been wearing the white variant. So pretty much the same thing. You guys can see, got these laid out, just long underwear, and that was the very base of their warming layers. Here's another example, probably very common for Marines. This is a Navy variant. Obviously, the Marine Corps works hand in hand with the Navy, so a lot of our stuff would make sense that it was Navy gear. So, just a couple examples of cold weather base layer long underwear. These are the M1951, I believe. So this is the stuff that would come out late Korean War that would replace this stuff. Pretty much the same, guys. You guys can see. Very similar, but you know, they're adding to the design, making it more improved. This one looks like it has some sort of like suspender layers or suspender straps there, but same concept. Long underwear. There's a shirt. Again, M1951. This is the kind of stuff that would have came out towards the end of the Korean War. So, you know, lessons learned. If you guys haven't figured it out, we're still in Korea. So, guys have been there for a long time. This is a very common piece of gear here. 5-button sweater. This is synonymous with both services. Both services would have rocked these. You see these all the time in photos. But 5-button sweaters were very, very common. Let's see if we got the tag here. Let's see what the date is on this. I have no idea. Okay, November 21st, 1950. All right, so this is a period era sweater right here. Another piece of good gear that was commonly used in Korea, at least by the Marines. This is a warming vest. It's got alpaca fur in there. So a guy would wear this, a very small guy would wear this one. But you would see these, particularly with Marines. That alpaca fur is very warm. And that's just an example of stuff that guys would wear underneath their outer garments. Let's move over here. So this is a World War II era jeep cap, but moving into Korea, what we see a lot is these pile caps. So I don't remember the exact nomenclature. I'm sure I'm putting it up on the screen right now, but this is the early one. So you see a heck of a lot of guys wearing these. And then this is the M1951, I believe, pile cap. So this is the pile cap that replaced it. So the way you tell the difference is this pile cap has the fur on the bill here, and this one does not. But you see these a lot in the Korean War, okay?
Also want to mention the individual wool scarf. You see this quite a bit on Marine and Army soldiers, and you just wrap this around your neck to keep warm.
Moving over here to gloves. So typical glove liners worn by guys a lot, right? Individual fingered glove liners. And then you also have, for the really extreme temperatures, winter mittens. So these are mitten liners. So what you would do is you'd put these on, right? And then you would put them in these outer shells. So I got two different variants here, but those mitten liners would go on your hand, go into the outer shell, and then you would fight like that, right? These are trigger finger mittens, meaning that you have access to your trigger finger, your thumb, and then the rest of your fingers would stay inside the mitten itself. So not as much dexterity as you would have with like individual fingered gloves, but mittens, without a doubt, keep your hands more warm than those individual style of gloves.
Another pair of gloves that I need to mention that are used quite frequently in the Korean War are the black leather gloves. You see these quite a bit, so when it's not cold enough that you need mittens and you want individual finger dexterity, you could wear these black leather gloves in conjunction with your wool glove liners, and that would provide some warmth, and you still have use of individual fingers for your gloves. But you see these quite a bit in Korea, and these are still used today, and they're good for work. So even if it's not cold, you put your black leather gloves on, for digging fighting positions or whatnot, and they're just good work gloves. All around good purpose glove. That's why it's been in service for so long.
All right, moving over here. So I have one uniform laid out. This is, I believe these are both M1951 uniforms, but these are made out of wool. So this is like a wool utility shirt. And these are wool trousers. So what you would have is guys wearing their long underwear, then their wool layer, and then their utility layer, and then you start getting into the jackets and things like that, okay? So this is kind of synonymous with both branches. Both branches had their respective, wool style uniforms, and this was the M1951 that'd be introduced later in the war, towards the end anyways. All right, first jacket I'm gonna talk about, this is the, I believe the M1941 jacket in World War II. So like this is the kind of jacket that you saw Marines hitting the beach on Iwo Jima with. This would be replaced during World War II. However, I have seen some pictures of guys still wearing these, okay? So you have some of those World War II veterans that are still in the service, still rocking some of their own stuff, or old stuff. That's there. Moving forward, you have the M1943 field jacket and trousers, okay? So here's an example of the M1943 field jacket. This is probably the most common field jacket worn during the Korean War, at least on the onset, okay? In combination with that field jacket is the pile liner jacket, okay? So a lot of guys would wear just these as an actual, just a regular jacket to throw on, kind of like a smoking jacket. But the idea was you'd wear this in combination with the 43 field jacket. Look familiar? Looks very similar to the M65 field jacket that we all know and love. So here's just an example of the M1943 trousers. You guys see the suspenders, and these are you know, a thicker, heavier weight material, better for cold weather conditions. But guys that were going into, you know, battles like the Chosin Reservoir, like, they didn't have all this good, high speed cold weather gear of the time. Okay, so a lot of those guys had their regular utilities. They might have had long underwear, their regular utilities, and then they're going to have a parka, which we're going to talk about here next. All right, real quick, guys, before we go into parkas, I just want to kind of point out a difference between the M1943 field jacket and the M1951 field jacket. So obviously this was introduced late in the Korean War, but you guys can see this one is secures with buttons. Okay, you see this collared flap here? This collared flap has buttons on it, probably for a hood, and then it also has buttons in the inside to accept that this liner here. Okay, but very similar in design, but does have some subtle differences that, you know, you might not pick up. But this is what would replace the M1943 that was very common in Korea.
Okay guys, so for the Army parkas, or primarily Army parkas, this one's unique because it has belt loops, so you can actually wear your trouser belt on the outside of that, cinch it up, keep that wind from coming inside. These have a liner also. This liner snaps in, so it's got like a faux fur liner, but it's got, you can see this is wool here in the sleeves. This will be a relatively warm parka, so you've got the fur and wool on the inside, and then you've got the cotton on the outside to help break up the wind a bit. And this has got a hood, and the hood is fur lined also. We also had a really common one, which was the fishtail parka. A couple variations of this, but this was also capable of having a liner buttoned inside, and very similar in design and capability. It doesn't have the capability though to take the belt on the outside with the belt loops. But these fishtail parkas, they were known as fishtails because if you look at the back, kind of hang down like a fishtail would. This is very common to see guys in the Army using these fishtail parkas in photos from the Korean War.
All right, let's talk about some of the Marine stuff now. This is kind of similar to Army stuff as well, but this is a field overcoat, and the Army would have had a variant of this, but this is obviously a Marine one. You see the Marine Corps chevrons on there. But kind of like a rain trench coat per se, and it had a liner that could snap in. You guys can come up here and see this tag here. It's dated 1952. It's M1950. So just like I said, overcoat, kind of a rain coat, but you do see some guys, particularly like rear echelon or high-ranking officers, wearing overcoats like this when they come in. It does have a belt to secure it around the waist. All right, so moving on. So with Marines had a completely different parka, okay? You'll typically hear it. Marines are wearing a Navy parka. So I just want to show you this. This is a Navy parka of the era, okay? You guys can see long parka, has that alpaca liner, and it's actually stamped USN. It has a waist belt. It has two pockets down here at the, you know, around your thighs and whatnot. So this is an actual Navy parka. But you are often heard or hear that the Marines are wearing Navy parkas. So I'm only showing you guys that so that you know what a Navy parka looks like. This is what they're referencing when they're talking about the Marines wearing the Navy parka. This is actually a Marine Corps specific garment, and they're very hard to find. There's not very many out there, but they're very unique, and they're much different than the ones that the Army was wearing. But you guys can see it's got upper pockets here. Everything secures with these big oversized buttons, which is very helpful in the winter months. You have the larger pockets down here, and this is a very long parka. This goes all the way down to around your shin level. Open this up. You guys can see it's got the alpaca liner in there. Very, very long, heavy, and pretty warm coat, if I do say so myself. It has adjustments tabs on here. Okay, so you guys can see the buttons. So if you needed to tighten it up, you can button it further forward to help cinch down the waist. So, but this is the Marine Corps parka. This is what Marines wore. You won't see these on the Army guys at all. This is very much a Marine specific garment. All right, guys, so that wraps up the Marine Corps parka. So these are pretty much the most common parkas that were used in Korea. There was lots of them. We can't possibly own them all and cover them all, but hope you guys get a good understanding of what those guys were using to keep themselves warm. All right, let's talk about some over white camouflage. So what would our guys wear in the wintertime, particularly later in the war? And that is most likely M1950 style over white camouflage. So you guys can see in this tag here, it says parka, field over white, M1950. And this is just a simple, you know, quick drying cotton over jacket or parka that you would throw over your regular utilities. They're, the pockets right here are just pass-through pockets, so no means of actually carrying anything in here. You just, you know, these would open up so that you can access the pockets on your normal cold weather parka or field jacket, whatever the guy was wearing. Secures with button up, so just simple buttons. Has some drawstrings here to tighten up around your waist. Has a hood, drawstrings to tighten up the hood. Simple elastic cuffs. And that's pretty much it for the parka. It's pretty simple, guys. So the trousers, M1950 style trousers. Here's a tag. It says trousers field over white M1950. So you would just put these on over whatever your normal field trousers are. You guys can see what's got one button there, some drawstrings to tighten it up, and again, pass-through pockets so that you can access the pockets on your regular utility uniform. At the bottom, some drawstrings so you can tighten up the over white trousers around your boots. And the last piece associated with the snow camouflage would be the M1950 mitten covers. So you have your normal mittens, and these would just go right over the top of them. They cinch down right here. You just adjust those. You guys can see it's got the thumb and a little cut there so that your trigger finger can go through if need be. It says mittens over white M1950. And that is the winter over white snow camouflage during the Korean War. All right, guys, so next thing we're going to talk about is individual body armor. So the Korean War saw a lot of revolutionary changes in the individual infantrymen in terms of personal protection. And we see that in the introduction of flak vests. Before that, World War II, primarily you had flak vests for like bomber crew pilots. You know, they were wearing that to protect them against the flak up in the air. But now we're seeing with the invention of lighter weight materials, more stronger, lighter weight materials, flak vests getting introduced to individual warfighters. So we start seeing individual Marines and soldiers wearing several different prototypes of vests and essentially trying them out, and it's paving the way for the individual infantryman's body armor going forward into the new generations, okay? So first ones I'm gonna talk about are some of the common ones for Marines. And that is the M51 style vest right here. You guys can see on the back, you got kind of a web strap that goes all the way around. It secures with both zipper and button. And on the inside of these flaks, it's just a series of interlocking plates called Doron plates. Kind of a tough plastic, ballistic plastic that could help stop rounds. I mean, 70% of casualties are caused by fragmentation, exploding mortars, artillery, grenades, things of that nature, okay? Not necessarily bulletproof, okay? So if you got hit with, you know, a rifle round or something along those lines, probably wouldn't stop it. But, you know, if you took a round from a PPSH from distance, right, and the round slowed down by the time it hit you, might actually stop that round, okay? Another vest that was entered into service in Korea for Marines in particular, the M1952, kind of building on that M51 design. And you guys can see, very similar. It just omitted that large strap that went around the whole circumference of the vest. And it's replaced by just, you know, webbing. You have the M1910 style hangers at the bottom so that, you know, Marines could hang gear. It also has a grenade strap here that, you know, you can actually put the spoon of the grenade through. It has a pocket up here at the front for whatever, notepad, whatever the case may be. They didn't know it when they designed it, but the future 20 round M16 magazine would fit perfectly in there. So, but that's it, guys. That's essentially the Marine vest in a nutshell.
So a couple that you see the Army using, this is the M12. This is really unique. I want you guys to have a look at this. First of all, it comes with a growing protector. This is soft armor, and this would snap into the plate and hang down from the plate. And I say plate because this is actually filled with a bunch of hard armor plates, but since they're small and they're stacked on one another and they overlap, it gives some flexibility to the vest. Same thing on the front. It's got a waist strap that comes around. This is almost like what we would consider today like a trauma plate. It snaps in place. It's got adjustable snaps on the shoulder so that you can adjust the height of how it rides. And then in the back you've got more overlapping plates that give some flexibility to what is really an entirely hard armor construction. I can see there's some nylon, some heavy duty nylon on the inside, while you've got canvas on the outside. And some of these nylon products are starting to be pretty new, and it's the things that we use every day today when we're working with modern armors. This is your 1952 M1952A vest. And this is actually probably an ultra modern vest for the time, because this feels and wears a lot like even a PAS GT vest from the 80s. It's completely soft armor. It's got laces down the side so that you can adjust the circumference of it. It's got a zipper front with snaps as backup. We've got grenade loops across the top so we can hang grenades, and a couple of big pockets right in front. This is constructed, the outer shell is of a thin nylon, and you can kind of, these also have the epaulets. Yeah, thank you. I thought that's what it was, but I don't speak French. Epaulets, and it's one of the few that has epaulets. I don't think any of the Marine ones have them, do they? No, this is pretty unique to this M1952A vest, and these would continue to be used until the Vietnam War. You see them used in Vietnam sometimes as well.
Yeah, and it's important to note that, you know, during the Korean War, like, there were several different prototypes of vests. You could tell that the services were trying to figure out what they liked and what they preferred, and ultimately, this Marine Corps M1952 and this M1952A vest would be the ones that went forward. And this would lead into the development of the M1955, which would supersede this. But you see M1952s in Vietnam in those early years. So it's just a testament to how well they were designed and built, that they went on to the next generation of war.
Okay guys, Army helmets, or helmet, as we were pointing out. I've only got one example here. Well, we've got several sort of Marine versions, but one of the things that you don't see the Army doing much in Korea are camouflage covers or even camouflage nets. It was very popular in World War II, and one of the changes that happened for whatever reason was by the time we get to Korea, you don't see much in the term of netting or netting or covers. But this is essentially this is a World War II shell that I've restored, an original. There were a lot of helmets in Korea that were World War II helmets, and they had either been just as they were issued in World War II, or they had been updated. This is, again, that light khaki color, which was real common in World War II, starts to become much less common in Korea, and you start to see these in a darker green color. Same thing on the helmet liners. This is an original World War II liner, but you would start to see as new ones were being made and refitted and updated that this light khaki color starts to yield to a darker green color, just like we talked about with both the uniforms and the other field equipment that's out there. Let's go over to Brent and see what he's got on Marine helmets.
All right, guys, now we're going to talk about some Marine helmets. Now, there's no real difference between an Army helmet and a Marine helmet other than we generally wore helmet covers. So you will see some pictures of Army guys wearing some field expedient helmet covers, like something that was made out of sandbag. That's generally, from my understanding, like later in the war. But for most part, they didn't wear helmet covers, just like in World War II. But Marines wore helmet covers, and they were reversible helmet covers. You guys can see you have a green side and a brown side. So essentially the term was green side out, brown side out. Theory being, hey, you hit the beach, you're brown side out, and if need be, if the terrain starts changing, you can go green side out, okay? Very similar to the Army helmets. Again, you guys can come in close and look, but those are two different, kind of what Bruce was talking about. You got a lighter, khaki shade of liner, and here's a darker green a liner here, okay? And then also in the same helmet, you see that lighter shade. So again, you know, they're using the stuff that they have. They're not gonna change everything up. They're gonna use that production. So with these M1 helmets, you generally have two different variations. In World War II, you had your fixed bail. As you guys can see, the bail itself is fixed to the helmet. And then you had these, the later production, which are swivel bail, meaning that swivels, okay, so it, you know, adjusts. But this would be an example of an earlier World War II helmet here. And this cover, this is the original cover, guys, and you can see, look how green the camouflage pattern is, and just how it's faded over time. So that's pretty interesting to see how much more green it was when it started out. But you guys can see reversible helmet cover, okay, and no eyelets for inserting vegetation. Later on, patterns in World War II would adopt or have implemented the eyelets. You will see all these different variations, all these different patterns of Marine helmet covers, you know, carrying forth and being used. So there might be some helmets without eyelets, and there will be helmets with eyelets. So you see it all, guys. The big things to take away are, hey, M1 helmet, here's how the helmet itself attached. Just had a little hook, goes over, it snaps in place. To undo it, just come over the top, and it unsnaps. Which is a little bit different than the M1s you see in Vietnam, which had a little ball, so you can attach that ball, and then you know, those can quickly detach by pulling. So there was a common belief that, you know, if you attached your strap to your head and an explosion went off, your helmet and your head might go with it. So that's why you see a lot of guys not wear their chin straps, particularly in World War II. One additional note that I do want to mention is that you do see Marines without helmet covers. It does happen. I don't know if it's just a shortage of supply issue or just a unit SOP, but there are pictures of Marines without helmet covers. I also want to mention this. This is a mosquito net, goes over the helmet, and then you'll see some guys that are actually using this as a helmet cover itself. And this will go all the way into use in the Vietnam War.
Okay guys, let's look at just some cook sets and cooking utensils, things that were used to cook when you were out in the field. This is going to be your common infantry mess kit. These go way, way, way back, and they were used through Vietnam and probably post-Vietnam also. Very simple stainless steel construction. You'd have a handle here, so you could use that as a skillet or a pan over the fire. And then you've got a plate here with a divider, so you could put two different foods and not get them mixed up to one another or together. And then we've got spoon, fork, and knife that all go together as part of this mess kit. This stuff's pretty common, particularly if someone's bringing in hot food. Maybe they're bringing it in using a Mermite container, and then they can go down the line and get your chow. Well, speaking of squad cook sets, and this would be used on something more like a camp stove for the squad. So you've got what's essentially a skillet there with handles. You got a pot inside with a bale, and then we've got another pot right here with a bale. We could boil water in this, make coffee or whatever you want, anything that you wanted to go hot, stews, whatever you had at the time. Let's look at this little cook stove. Now this is pretty unique. This one's actually dated 1945. So it's got an aluminum canister. And then inside, look at this. It's got a little stove. You can fuel it up right here. This is going to be where you place your fuel. And it's got these little legs. Fold out. So it'll sit down and hold itself upright. These guys come up, and once you've got this thing running, I believe there's a valve here which can control how hot this is going to get, how hard it's going to run. But then you could come right over with your camp pot, put it right on top, boil your water. You could do the same thing with your mess kit if you had a mess kit. Those little fold-out wings work really well, and this is a lightweight way for individual soldiers to be able to heat up a little food, a little coffee in the morning, whatever, and not have to put a fire together and try to get a fire going. It's great for wet weather, where maybe the sticks that are around you are wet, hard to get a fire going. Right here, you can do it and not put out a lot of flame.
All right, real quick, ponchos. So Marines could just continue to use the same, frog camouflage style poncho that they used towards the end of World War II, and the Army would have a thick OD green rubber poncho. All right, guys, let's talk about sleeping bags. So these are probably the same between the U.S. Army and Marine Corps, but if you can come on in here, we got a M1949 sleeping bag here. I believe, yeah, mountain bag, sleeping bag, mountain, M1949. That's what remains of the tag there. But you guys can see it's a pretty comfortable bag here. And that was one of the key differences in Korea with that cold weather, is guys were getting these sleeping bags to stay warm. And I want to say, I remember reading somewhere that they were finding guys killed and or bayoneted that were in their sleeping bags, and it became a standing order, at least in one Marine unit, that they could no longer be in their sleeping bags while on duty, on post, right? Because what was happening is that the Chinese were attacking, or the North Koreans were attacking, and guys were being stuck in their sleeping bags and or falling asleep on watch. So that's the M1949. Here's a USMC marked sleeping bag, probably later war, same type of version bag, and this one says bag comforter sleeping, and it is dated, where are we at, 30 June 1952. Okay, now these also had what we kind of refer to as a bivy sack nowadays, but this is kind of a water resistant outer layer that goes over your sleeping bag. So this is case sleeping bag, M1945, water repellent. So this would be the outside layer of the sleeping bag.
So the sleeping bag consisted of the water repellent layer, your M49 mountain bag, and then finally a wool sleeping bag liner that went inside. So between these three, it provides you pretty good warmth. And one final piece of gear for the individual infantry, Marine, and Army soldier during the Korean War for sleeping is just your tried and true wool blanket. This has been a mainstay staple for infantrymen through generations, and wool has just always been a fantastic material for cold weather operations because it retains heat even when wet. But on the left we have your forest green USMC wool blanket, and on the right we have your typical mustard color World War II era wool blanket for the Army.
All right, another very interesting piece of gear during that time period is the shelter half. So the idea being that each individual soldier or Marine would carry half of a tent. So you would have one half shelter plus your allotment of poles and stakes, and combine that with another Marine or soldier, and you'd have one complete pup tent. So the Marine Corps had camouflage shelter halves, similar to the ones they had, well, the exact same that the ones that they had in World War II in the frog pattern camouflage. And these are reversible with your green side out, as well as your brown side out camouflage. You often see these rolled up around haversacks, and they'd be secured with these lashing straps in the same style camouflage pattern. We also see with the Marines the introduction of the Mitchell camouflage pattern during the Korean War. This is pretty much synonymous with Vietnam, but it actually was first introduced during the Korean War. And just like the frog style camouflage, it had a brown side out that was brown dominant. And the lashing straps associated with that were in the same Mitchell style camouflage pattern. Now, the Army wasn't as cool as the Marine Corps. They did not have camouflage shelter halves. They had the plain Jane OD green style shelter halves. All right, guys, so that completes our overview of the uniforms, gear, weapons, and equipment worn by both the United States Army and United States Marines in the Korean War. Hope you guys are enjoying what you're seeing. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We're definitely going to have more stuff to come down the pipe. And if you haven't seen our Vietnam era uniform, weapons, gear, and equipment videos, be sure to check those out. Bruce, what do you got?
Yeah, I don't know if a video like this has really been done before. It's just one of those conflicts that didn't stir up a lot of interest, but no one really knows why. It should have. You know, tremendous amount of sacrifice from the troops, all of the UN troops that fought in that war. And we think we put together a pretty good presentation for you here. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And let's just take this time to sort of remember those veterans and the sacrifices that they made. And if you see one of those guys with those Korea hats on out there, there's still a few of them out there. Be sure to thank them for their service.
Yeah, and I'll tell you who doesn't regard this as the forgotten war, and that's the people of South Korea, because their country would not exist had it not been for our forces that went in there to hold the line against communist aggression. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to leave a comment.